Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 294. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed team of Nicki and Ricky, Baffling Birds, Rowena, Zahnrei, and Sarah Steinberg.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You're welcome. So this is exciting. The two of you just finished having an incredibly successful crowdfunding campaign for your latest book, Nicki and Ricky, Baffling Birds. And you're also members of the Kids Comic Unite group too, correct?
Yep, that's right.
And that's where we met. So Kids Comics Unite is largely to blame or praise for this partnership, depending on how you feel about the work we're putting out.
For those that might have missed the Nicki and Ricky, do you want to explain to folks how the two of you came up with the concept of this book? And it's set to be a series, correct?
Yes, as it is now, it's a trilogy of 3 stories.
Wow.
Yeah, we have the Mystery of the Shell Tree, the Hummingbird Conundrum, and the Case of the Duck's Teeth. And we even have a science investigator's workbook to go along with the stories.
What's the age range for these books?
I'd say about 6 to 10, with a little bit of wiggle room on either end.
Okay.
Well, the origin story is kind of interesting. It goes back to how Sarah and I met. We were both taking a Kids Comics Unite masterclass, trying to bone up on our skills, and I wanted to have some more practice writing for comics, working on that format because it's so different from everything else, and I wanted to get better at it. And Sarah wanted to work on anatomy, right? Hands and things.
Yeah, I was trained as an architect, so I'm real comfortable with backgrounds and buildings and perspective, but drawing people is a little bit of it's a little bit new to me in this career change. And so I wanted someone to give me a story where I could just really practice making people look reasonable.
So we started, messaging each other during the course, and then we started emailing each other. And I had this pretty old story sitting around in my unfinished stories file. Never go in there; it's scary in there. There's so many, and it was actually based on a real life thing that I used to do with my dad when I was little. I would go hiking on the trails of Goddard Park, not too far from my house, and I would be basically hunting Smurfs and looking for dinosaur tracks and any interesting things that I could find. And we actually came across a tree that had these quahog shells, these clam shells piled at the bottom and also up in the branches. And it was just this mystery that we had to solve. So I thought, oh, that would be kind of fun if I was to write a little short kids comics about this. Maybe I'd write a little short story about this, but it never really went anywhere. So I had this totally unfinished blob of a story, and I showed it to Sarah. And she said, oh, there might be some potential in this. Initially, I had the idea that it would be starring the stuffed animals that I would carry around with me when I was little, and we went on these hiking adventures. This one is Racky. He's a raccoon with his raccoon tail. And this one is Nicki. And she's pale blue. And so these are the origins of Nicki and Ricky. It's Nicki and Racky.
Okay.
And they were my adventure companions, along with my Smurf decoy house. My Smurf decoy. We'd be hunting Smurfs. So along with them, and my dad, I'd be, going around the trails looking for all these things, and that's where the shell tree story actually happened. And so I was telling this to Sarah, and she says, let's make them kids. Instead of them being bears or raccoons, they can be kids. And so that's where Nicki and Ricky came from.
And so with that, so Sarah, was that, part of your idea, like you really wanted to learn how to draw people and hands? Is that the reason why you said, hey, I don't want to learn how to draw raccoons and bears. I want to learn how to draw people.
And, I would have been good doing animal characters as well. Marie was more interested when she saw them as kids. Something about that inspired her to to fill out the story a little bit more, and she got more excited about the top sketch, and so that was the direction we went. This was just an experiment. This was just something we were going to do for ourselves to play around, and it kind of, I have ADHD, I have some impulsivity issues, and so when something gets me excited, I'm like, oh yes, let's do that, and then maybe let's do that, and then maybe let's do that, and so it just kind of kept going until we suddenly had what looked like a finished book.
Yeah. Yeah, once I saw them as kids, the whole story fell into place. I was able to finish the script in like 3 hours and send it to Sarah. I was like, I'm so excited, I have a thing. And so right away, we knew that we had something to play with.
So you mentioned that it was different than how you would write regular, like prose, right? So what are some of the differences between writing a comic book script as compared to other forms of writing?
Well, with prose, you can go inside their heads. There's lots of description. You're writing things in paragraphs. You can get really in depth. You can go like Victor Hugo deep into stuff and describe like the moss on the walls of a cathedral or something. And it's all in prose. With a screenplay, it's more visual, but it's still different. But with a graphic novel, you're not only thinking visually, but you're in the text. You're not necessarily limited, but you can get inside people's heads. You can give them an inner monologue, but you have to be aware of like, how long is this? You can't have tons and tons of text. I mean, technically you can, but then it would end up being something more like a hybrid. So you have to think really carefully about what they're thinking, how they're feeling, what they'd say, what their voice is like. And then you have to think, how am I going to pair this with images without stepping on an illustrator's toes? So you have to be able to give the impression of what you want without going into that Victor Hugo moss type detail. So it's very different from plays that I've written and from books that I've written.
It's different from picture books as well. In a picture book, there's always an argument about, do you put in art notes? Or does the text give all of the emotion and all of, everything you need for the artist to fill it out? And, once in a while, you really do need art notes. In a graphic novel, so much of the emotion and so much of the action is never written on the page, on the final page. Yeah. And so you do have to do a lot more art noting than you would in a picture book. But it's much longer than a picture book. In a picture book, you maybe have 500 words total, but even in a 32-page graphic novel like ours started out being, there was a lot more description of action because I had to understand where the characters were going, what they were picking up, what they were doing, because everything's just dialogue that's on the page.
Yeah, right. It expanded very quickly from being about 3 pages to being about 9 pages long, just to explain everything and make sure everything was in place. Everything, it's all like it's pretty well planned, but then there's still that spontaneous aspect of what can happen when the art meets the words, and it's I think a little more of a 60-40 with the art to the words because the art adds so much to the words. And yeah, that's where a lot of the emotion comes through. That's where you see the action. So when you're writing them, you really have to think about that and still leave plenty of space for the artist to bring the magic.
Right. Now, so Sarah, being an architect, I'm presuming you're not using SketchUp or anything when you do this. I'm sure they're using a different software.
No. I have used SketchUp many times in my life. And, I think if I were doing a book with a lot of complicated architectural backgrounds, I might still hop back over there and, use the tools that I'm fast with. But no, I'm using, good old pencil and paper. The first draft of this book I did in watercolors and scanned. Okay. Way too time consuming. Love painting watercolors. Not gonna happen. And so I'm actually redoing our first book right now in Clip Studio Paint digitally.
Okay. All right. So this is something that you mentioned that both of you kind of like were deliberate in getting out of your comfort zones to actually expand your own profession in a way. As you said, Sarah, you're an architect, and then Marie, you were actually writing more, expanding out, doing
Yeah,
prose work.
from prose, yeah.
Yeah.
And nonfiction academic articles, things like that.
Okay, wow. Right. Yeah.
So a little bit different.
Yeah, I've always been a writer and an illustrator as well. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I didn't go to college for it because practical reasons, whatever. Everybody says you don't want to be a starving artist, go do architecture. That's kind of like illustrating. You get to draw and be creative, and it's true. It was a creative career, and I don't regret it. But I kind of hit my midlife crisis, I think, and decided it was time to aim back for my dreams. And so I started taking classes in picture books to be an author illustrator, and then kind of basically what happened is I wrote a manuscript that I wanted to be a picture book, but everybody said, no, you can't. Sorry, it's not going to fit. You're going to have to make this a graphic novel. So I ended up in the KCU classes to try to figure out how to make that a graphic novel.
Right. And have you figured that out?
I'm on a little bit of a deadline with my agent. She wants to submit it next month, and I don't know if I'm going to make it, but I'm working on it.
So the process is that you had 3 stories in one on here for your crowdfunding campaign. Were there more scripts? And the 2 of you decided these are the 3 we're going to do with right now? Or was this the 3 stories that were the only ones you came up with?
I don't know. This is an experiment that grew really, really quickly. but we actually have an idea for 9 stories altogether. That's a potential thing. But they're in groups of 3s. There's like a theme for each group of 3. So the first one was Baffling Birds, where a bird is the miscreant that they have to investigate for each of the first 3 stories. Like the shell tree, the hummingbird conundrum, the case of the duck's teeth. They're all birds. The next 3 would be mysterious monsters, where Nicki and Ricky would essentially have to debunk, like urban legends at school. Like, okay. There's some kind of horrible troll under the bridge. Wait, maybe it's a snapping turtle. Things like that. And they're still nature mysteries. All of our stories are nature mysteries. They are centered around the scientific method, really. And it's a lot of observation and testing and coming up with your hypothesis and testing that. And then seeing what your results might be. Are you right? Are you wrong? And what does that tell you? Because it's not always bad to be wrong about your initial hypothesis. You can always change it and learn more from your results. So that's really the basis of, that's the foundation of the Nicki and Ricky structure. So the first one would be the Baffling Birds, then the mysterious monsters, and then the last one would have been living fossils. If we get to that, it would be living fossils, because there are plenty of fascinating plants and animals that are around today that were around gazillions of years ago and may have met a dinosaur. Their great ancestors may have met dinosaurs. So living fossils are still among us, and that would be really fun for them to investigate. Right. And it's actually one of the fun things that my dad likes pointing out when we go hiking. He's like, that's really ancient kind of fern, and that's really ancient there. And so, yeah.
And so how did so as you mentioned through the putting in a STEM background to this, is that something that you learned through Kids Comic Unite, that it's really important to at an educational level to these stories, or is that just something that the 2 of you are passionate about?
I think that's more something that we're passionate about. Well, going back to school stuff, I trained as a historian, and that's why I have some, peer-reviewed articles and stuff out there. And I've taught history at the college level, and I've tutored from basically kindergarten through college students. And I just thought, if we're going to be doing this, and it's going to be with nature stuff, let's put the science stuff in it. And Sarah's all about that too. She's like, this is awesome, let's do this. And that's where the Nicki and Ricky Summer Science Investigator Society should come in, I think, if you want to talk about that.
That was one of my ADHD flights of fancy, I think. I've got an 8-year-old, and I was talking to a friend of mine who also has an 8 and a 4-year-old about what would entice her to sign up for a mailing list for something like this.
Right.
How are we going to set this up? I was just we were about to launch the crowdfunder, and I was losing my mind a little bit. And I knew my friend had opened shops before, and she said, very kindly, listen, I don't really sign up for newsletters. If you're going to get me to sign up for something, she's like, I would sign up for your newsletter because you're my friend. But like most of the time, no, absolutely not. Right. I'm not getting another piece of mail, especially if I know you just want to sell me something. She said, this really has to be a transaction. You have to be giving me something that's worth the trouble of reading an email. And so I thought, okay, what if, summer was about to start. The kids were all about to get out of school. We were all like, how did this happen? What are we going to do with them?
Right.
And I thought, okay, our kids love reading comics. That's the whole point. What about making comics? What about going out and doing science in their backyards and making comics about it, just like we're making comics about nature? So I started a investigators society where I sent out a few pages of comics templates every week for 8 weeks. And if kids filled them out, they would be able to make basically a whole comic book, a whole scientific method mini story. Cool. And so now we have a workbook that I also need to get ready to have printed and made to another thing. But yeah, I think, I got a lot of people very excited. I don't know how many actually have done it. I haven't gotten a lot of feedback, but it was fun to make.
Right.
And I think at least a few people will have done it.
Here's hoping.
And yeah, so the idea was that, just like Nicki and Ricky in the stories, they get to find a mystery, investigate a mystery, and make their own comic.
Well, and I love that we're looking at here on your crowdfunder page. You actually have like a peek inside the workbook. So is that what you're talking about? So is that the workbook, or this is separate of the newsletter piece?
Well, it's going to be part of the workbook. So that was the explanation page about each week came with a one-page comic explaining what was happening inside those pages, and what's a hypothesis? Have you say that word? What does it mean? What am I asking you to do here? We tried to have Nicki and Ricky do a little bit of an introduction there. Okay.
And what made you give you the idea of the QR code? That's a really good idea too.
We were talking about making flyers, and really we were just thinking about how to make it really easy to get people to our website. I was trying to be, I know as a parent and just as a busy person out in the world, like anything that takes me too many steps is just not going to happen. I'm not going to look at a poster and type in a whole website. And even if I do, I'm probably going to get it wrong. And then I'm going to give up and get distracted by something else. So, yeah, I decided to make a QR code. It just takes you to the website. So hopefully that's helpful.
And so I'm also really curious about, it was a very successful crowdfunding campaign. What are some of the things that you're able to put in place? Some of the successful ideas and tricks that you're able to put in place So talk to us a little bit about the actual, the perks that you actually put in place in the crowdfunding campaign as well.
Well, our initial goal was just to be able to make them as paperback books. But we had stretch goals after that, because it turned out, we were not expecting this, but it turned out that we actually made our initial funding goal less than 12 hours after we launched. Wow. And we were, I'm still like, what? But it's amazing. And a lot of that is thanks to, the crowdfunding crucible at Kids Comics. We got to do a live stream event and really promote it on the day that we launched. So people were aware and they were interested and they wanted to help us out. So that was pretty awesome that we were able to do that. And we were doing the crowdfunder spotlight, the Kids and YA content creator spotlight. In July, so that gave us 30 days to meet that goal. We met it in less than 12 hours, so we're like, now we need stretch goals. So we had these 4 stretch goals. The first one we met that first day too, because we made our actual goal. That was to be able to make all 3 books. At first it was just going to be the first 2, and then the third one was, well, if we make it, we'll throw in the third one. We'll make that one too. And we made it. So it's like, now we have to make the third one. The toothy ducks are going to be real.
I see.
Yeah. And so that was the first one we met. And then we met our hardcover goal. So not only are our books going to be available as ebooks and as paperbacks, but they're also going to be available as a hardcover 3-in-1 trilogy. So you can get all three together in a special hardcover bound book. And we were hoping that we'd be able to get that so we could maybe hopefully get into libraries.
Right.
Because when I went with our flyers with the QR code to local public libraries, and I was asking about, Nicki and Ricky and if there were any, reading events or anything like that, they told us that they would be interested in the books as long as they were hardcover, because apparently softcover ones don't have a long lifespan when they start circulating. So that was one of our goals for the sake of libraries, but it's also pretty cool that it's going to be hardcover. And then the third one was being able to finish in time for the holidays so that everything would be ready for shipping by the holidays. And then the last one was our total pie in the sky one that we never expected to make, and that's a possible hopeful table at Comic-Con next year. So now we're like, hey, we might actually be able to do that. We might actually be able to meet in person, and that would be so amazing if that could happen at Comic-Con.
I think we're definitely going to go and meet in person, whether we table or not.
I agree. I agree with that.
All right.
Do all the numbers about that, but
yeah. So that's basically where we are right now. We've got the 3 books that are going to be available as ebooks, paperback, and hardcover. And there's also the Science Workbook that is available as an ebook, and also that will be available in paperback. Because people will probably draw on that, copy it. It's better off being paperback.
Exactly.
So Sarah, I'm kind of curious because you did the 3 books. Did you see an evolution in your style as you were creating those?
Well, they're not all done yet. So that's the real thing. We did the shell tree as this kind of personal project. We got it to a place where we were kind of happy with it. But yeah, I'd done that in watercolor, on actual analog paper. And over that year, I did take another class, and I did start to have some evolution in my style. We also did a comic that was in a anthology. We did a 10-page comic for an anthology together, and I did that digitally. And I started to realize how much faster that was and how much more marketable. It's a more marketable kids comics style. If you look at what's selling, if you look at what's on the shelves, most of them are digital, a little more flat than what I had done. So when we started this crowdfunder, again, this was just an experiment. We had no idea what was going to happen. I said, okay, I'm going to start redoing the shell tree. I'm going to start redoing the shell tree digital so they can all match. And as it stands, I think I've got 3 more pages to redo in shell tree. And then I have the other 2 yet to do. Because the Investigators Society, that was a comic a week for the last 8 weeks, that I wasn't anticipating. Like, that just kind of happened, and I got excited about it and made some promises, and so but yes, there's definitely been an evolution in style. There's definitely been, I've increased my speed. I've increased my just my process overall of how to get this done in a timely and consistent manner. So I think the next 2 books will go a lot more quickly.
So I got a question. Same question for both of you, but I'll ask you first, Sarah. Now, working with Rowena, has this made you a better artist working with her?
Absolutely. It's been so much fun, and I think what helped, and one of the reasons we wanted to work together was because I'm also a writer, and I'm working on some of my own author illustrator works, but a lot of those I have quite a bit of attachment to. I have a vision. There's something in there that it's got to be right before I put that out there. And so when we started this with no audience in mind, with just ourselves in mind, it really freed me up to experiment, to make mistakes, to not, to work fast and just see what happened, because I didn't have strong vision. I didn't have a strong emotional connection to it. It was just something we were doing for fun and for practice. And so that's made me a much better artist because I'm less attached to every line I draw than I used to be.
Right. And what about you, Marie, then? Or has working with Sarah, has that made you a better writer?
I think so too. Yeah, because it's a lot of the same reasons. Also, I tend to be really, really shy. I mean, I'm doing this, but I tend to be really, really shy. She's ADHD. I'm autistic, and we actually put a little bit of ourselves into our character. So Ricky's got a little bit of my autistic obsessiveness and focus on details, and Nicki's got a little bit of her ADHD. Oh, look at that! Look at that! That's so cool. And then the thing is that the interesting thing that we found as we were creating these characters is the way that they click together like puzzle pieces, and they kind of fill in the parts that the other one might be missing. So if I'm like feeling super shy and nervous, she'll be like impulsive and she'll be like, let's just do this. And then I'm like, yeah, let's just do this. So that I think made me more willing to take risks with my writing. When normally I might just sit there for an entire day rereading the same paragraph and obsessing over each word. It's like, no, don't do that. Just go for it. And so that means that things get done faster and often better and with a lot less angst. and being able to share it right away is also really helpful, because then you get that connection and that feedback, and that gestalt thing happens when it starts becoming more than what you initially envisioned.
Other projects, I know you're still working on this one. Is this kind of like snowballing into more ideas of the two of you because you have great, creative chemistry with each other? Are you thinking about pining on other projects that the two of you could be possibly working with?
Quite possibly. I mean, I think, we're going to, I think we've decided to table more projects until these get done, because I looked at the deadline we committed to and had a little bit of a panic attack on Tuesday. So my brain is a little too full for any more to get on right now. But I think when we see, how this goes, how the success of this goes, I think we'll continue with Nicki and Ricky or see what else comes down the pipeline.
Right.
Yeah, because doing that Comics from the Kitchen anthology was really fun too. It was just a short little comic about a kid who wanted a birthday cake for her summer birthday that wouldn't melt, basically. And we got to do a recipe and everything. So yeah, there's all kinds of possibilities.
So Marie, if people want to learn more about your work, where's the best place they could go to?
I have a website, Rowena Zahnrei. .com.
Okay.
And our pages together, if they're interested in the Nicki and Ricky comics. The crowdfunder's closed, but it is open as a bookshop.
Okay.
At Crowdfunder, crowdfundr.com/Baffling Birds. And from there you can link over to our project page, which is bafflingbirds.saraesteinberg.com.
We each have our websites, and we share the crowdfunder, and that's where people can pre-order our books all the way basically to I guess our tentative launch date would be December 5th. That's when we're hoping that everything will be ready, and everything will be ready in time for the holidays.
Great. Well, thank you so much, the two of you. This has been great. When your next projects come along, come back on. This is great talking to both of you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Let me timestamp this. That's what I love about doing this. I can always timestamp things, and once I edit it,
we all sound foolish.
And then I make myself sound amazing. Yeah, that's how it works.